Hi, everyone. On behalf of HR.com, we'd like to welcome you to this webcast, When to Coach and When to Mentor, sponsored by Sounding Board. This webcast has been pre-approved for one HRCI credit, may also be submitted for SHRM credit, so please be sure to attend the complete webcast in order to receive your credits in your HR.com account. You'll receive an email from us within 2 business days that will include that certification information. And during this webcast, if you have questions for the presenter, we ask that you use the Q&A in your webinar controls. And the chat is also open for some engagement. We hope that you use that as well. And we're going to have some Mentimeter polls, and this should just be a really engaging, excellent presentation. So without further ado, it is my pleasure to turn it over to Iyad Yaqub.
All right. Thank you so much, Rhonda. How are you doing? How are you all doing? All right. So today we are going to talk about really important and fun subject about coaching and mentoring. And yeah, it's going to be more like a conversation than me talking at you. I'm sure a lot of people here today know a lot about coaching and mentoring and the what and the why and the how of each. And this is what we're going to do. We're going to discover more about these subjects, and hopefully by the end of the day, you know more about them and learn from you as well. All right, so let's start. So Sounding Board, what we do as Sounding Board, and I have Kelly, my colleague here, the head of content, joining in a second. But Sounding Board, we are a platform where we invest in leadership development. Our mission is to develop the most impactful leaders in the world through leadership coaching. So we have different services, the coaching platform, group coaching, and one-on-one executive coaching. And yeah, so what we're trying to do here is to kind of invest in leadership development. Our goal is all about better leaders who can create better environments, better workplaces. A little bit about myself. Right now, I lead behavioral science at Sounding Board. I joined back in November after years and years of working in learning and development, HR. I worked at 3 multi-billion-dollar companies, startups here in Silicon Valley. And before that, I used to work in higher education, where I led career coaching services and data insights, where I try to connect the work of career coaches with destination outcomes and tell a story about that. I decided to switch from higher education and international organizations and work with startups because I felt the work of startups is very meaningful when it comes to agility and fast-paced growth and solving problems that I personally care about. One of the problems I really care about is leadership development and have high-quality leaders in organizations. And what I do at Sounding Board is trying to tell the science story of that work we're doing with organizations and understand the data and try to up-level our leadership development game through behavioral science. Also, I research multiple areas. One of the areas that I'm really passionate about is the area of identities and meaningful work. And I was talking to Rhonda about what I do in terms of research. Mainly, I focus on women and women of color at hyper-growth environments and how we can use interventions like leadership development or leadership coaching to achieve a higher level of meaning and well-being for women and women of color and humanize the workplace in general. All right, so let's start. So before we talk about what we talk about, what we're going to talk about, let's do a quick check-in. So just one word in the chat. How are you feeling today? Just how are you? All right, let's see here. Oh, okay, I can see the chat. All right, great, excited, wonderful. Okay, I don't know, I only see the positive words. I'm not able to see any transactional words, if like engaged, hungry, fabulous, awesome, sleepy, of course, early morning, curious, tired. Well, I hope by today you can kind of achieve more positive feelings and be more hungry for sure. Awesome. All right. And how do you like to show up today? So you know how you're feeling. You bring in some consciousness and awareness to how you're feeling right now. No judgment. But how do you like to show up? What is the energy you're showing up with for this learning opportunity? All right. Ready. This is where we set intentions, right? Cool. Hungry for learning. I love this. Open-minded, creative, interested, beautiful. I share. I'm going to use the word curious here as well. And what is one thing you would like to get out of today's session or this conversation? Cool. All right, let's see. Try to be specific. Give yourself permission to say whatever you want. If something is bothering you, so you have something like tension, what in learning and development they call disequilibrium when it comes to coaching and mentoring, and if you feel like there are some competing ideas, it's your time right now to share that. Cool. Crucial conversations, practical tools, clarity of difference. This is like we have a really engaged group here today. Oh, wow, I'm super, super happy. It sounds like you charged my battery immediately. So the differences, beautiful, clarity of difference. So we all talking about the difference here for sure. Hope you leave with more clarity on the differences. Tools for conversation, beautiful. Okay, nice. I only see some of the comments, so I apologize if I can't see everything. All right, now let's start. So the agenda of today, I'm big on the concept of less is more, especially when it comes to content. So we only have 3 agenda items today: the what, the why, and the how. What I mean by the what is the difference that you asked for, the difference between coaching and mentoring, and not only the difference, how they actually overlap. And look at this overlap and the difference from a behavioral science lens and also from a practical lens. Then we're going to talk about the why. Okay, so we understand the what, we understand the difference, we understand the science behind it, but why? Why coaching and mentoring? Not why just from a intuitive way of thinking, but also from a science, data, research perspective, and how quantitatively and qualitatively different institutions and different organizations and different researchers actually are able to tell a better story when it comes to the impact of coaching and mentoring. And last, we're going to talk about some practical recommendations and case studies. With that, hopefully this next 50 minutes, I would say, will be something that you would say, you know what, that was a good investment of my time. Before we start, any questions, anything you would like to share, feel free to put in the chat, and I will try to keep an eye on the chat while we progress in this journey. All right, so let's start with the what. All right, today we're going to have some interactions. So it's going to be a really interesting one and fun by design, but also I'm leaving some of the things to the happenstance of today. So let's start with the what. I would like to ask the first question actually on Mentimeter. And if you can see here the code, not in the chat, go to menti.com using your cell phone or your laptop and put this code 1948632. And I think Rhonda will put that in the chat. All right. And I'm going to stop sharing for a second, and I'll go to Mentimeter to share my screen. All right. So do you see my screen, guys? Here you go.
There it is. Perfect.
Awesome. All right. So I'm going to present, and I'm seeing, all right, people are so fast. All right. Let's see here. Okay. So I should have put them as percentages. Here you go. Okay. All right. So more people know about coaching than mentoring. Less people about both, and less about consider me as the beginner. But I can see, there's some percentages are competing. I like that. Don't you like some interaction here? Beautiful. Let's see here. So coaching, mentoring. So I would say not huge differences happening here. I would say most people are, I would say 25%, 25%, maybe 20%, 27%. It's a balanced perspective. Some people know more about one thing, and some people know a lot about both of things. But a lot of people here would like to learn as beginners. This is beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing. Awesome. All right, let's go back, and you can see my screen again here. Okay. Okay. So let's start with this. So right into it. What is coaching and what is mentoring? Beyond semantics and beyond words, I look at the thing, if I want to define something like a subject or content or structure or anything pretty much, I look at it from a kind of very, very simple. What are we trying to achieve? And I can find the meaning and the definition of what I'm trying to define through that meaning, through that context. Generally speaking, is what we're trying to achieve through coaching and mentoring is to add value, all right? Add value and add value fast, and keep your client at the center of the conversation. They both, if this is your North Star, this is your compass is directing you, this is exactly where we want to focus our energy, our focus, our heart and head and hand and everything. Is like add value efficiently, and make the client the center of the conversation when it comes to both coaching and mentoring. Now, we'll talk about differences in a second, but let me share this quick story. When I decided when do you know that you know a subject really well is when you can explain it to a 5-year-old or a 9-year-old or someone who is not in business or work or still kind of trying to form their own meaningful aspects of life. And I asked my 9-year-old daughter, Reina, she just left to school. We live in California. And I asked her, Reina, when you think about coaching and mentoring, what comes to mind? She said, coaching, if like I think about sports, like sports coaching, and I feel like also I heard the word career coaching, somebody who finds people jobs. So, okay, interesting. And what about mentoring? Said, I don't know if I know about mentoring. So, okay, cool. That's awesome. Now, do you want me to kind of explain the difference? I said, yeah, that would be great. She said, I told her, imagine when you come from school, like come back home, and a problem happened with you or something you have like curious about. When you ask me about my opinion and what I did when I was your age, that would be probably mentoring. And when you ask me questions and I ask you back, so you can figure out what you want, but you figure out the problem and the solution yourself, that would be coaching. Now, I ask her after that, I say, oh, that's clear. I ask her after that, so which one is your favorite? She just like really took like 30 seconds thinking. And that happened this morning. And she said, I would prefer coaching. I'd like to discover the solution myself. I feel like I can solve it myself and that I can solve it next time without the help of somebody else. So just really interesting. So that's just like how I think about coaching and mentoring. When it comes to directional, and again, if you look at this as a spectrum, not like two subjects or two content or two, constructs in silos, it's a spectrum between coaching and mentoring. And we'll talk about the spectrum in a second, but think about mentoring. The first thing that comes to mind is that when you're trying to download your experience, your skills, your knowledge to someone who's trying to learn and get inspired by you and what you did in your life. So it's about you as a person when you are a mentor, and when you are a mentee or someone who's receiving the mentorship service or the on the receiving end of the relationship, you're trying to ask questions. You're trying to be curious, trying to understand what this person did and the context, right? So mentorship is about sharing and showing, right? It's about role modeling in a way or another. It's more directional and it's more telling, and the mentor is more talking than the mentee. Now, if you go all the way to the end of the spectrum and you go to coaching, and think about coaching, is the word coach came from, and we'll talk about the history of both, but the word coaching came from the word coach in Latin, and I think even before, it means like a wagon. And it's something that takes you from point A to point B. And coaching is about taking somebody in their life, in their career, in their relationship, in one of their well-being, aspects from a point A, their point A to point B, defined by that person, not defined by the coach. So it's more indirectional. You're more like a vehicle, more like an enabler for their growth and development and performance. It relies heavily on discovery and development, more on asking. And I said more, not just, or that's coaching. And the content of the coaching conversation mainly is about one of these three things: about insights, like mindset and bringing more awareness on how you think, about motivation and commitment and accountability and all these drivers of behaviors, and about skills. Skills coaching is one of the most well-known, fitness coaching or sports coaching. Mainly it's like a combination of skills and motivation, sometimes insights, right? Now, here's the trick. We live in a world right now where the lines between mentoring and coaching getting blurred and blurred. And it's so hard at one point of time to kind of basically think about this is mentoring and this is coaching. So maybe if we add a context variable here, that might help. Let's think about it this way. So in the context of leadership development, at Sounding Board, we don't do any coaching. We only do leadership development coaching. It's about adding the layer of the organization. So if you see the one here before, oh, here we go. So here, keep your client at the center of the conversation. When you talk about leadership development, workplace coaching, workplace mentoring, we're talking about client and organization. There's the organization's need and the client's need together, mutually inclusive. And if you think about that's your compass, how that impacting coaching and mentoring? Well, it is impacting. It's keeping the core of both true and the center. But at the same time, we're talking about, when we're talking about asking, we're talking about asking questions relevant to leadership development, relevant to capabilities of the coachee or the client or whoever is receiving the coaching service. Same thing with mentoring. We're not talking about mentoring in general. We're talking about mentoring in the context of leadership development. Discovery and development. It's not about your curiosity, or it's about in general curiosity of the conversation. You're not giving the client everything and say, what do you want to talk about today? It's less about that, and it's more how whatever we're going to talk about today is going to help you be a better leader. Whether through questions or feedback or resources or advice or whatever that is going to be within the context of leadership development. So I hope that helps. I can stop here for a few seconds if any questions about this. But we live in a world right now where you need and you have to be a successful leader, a successful manager, a successful talent leader in HR, learning, or you're managing teams yourself. It is so hard to wear one hat a day. You're going to keep switching hats. So maybe the analogy of hats doesn't work anymore. Maybe you find something else. I don't know, but could be something where you have this adaptive style of leadership and work, whether you are leading teams yourself or helping people to be better leaders, that when to switch from coaching and mentoring, when to switch from telling and asking, from sharing to discovery. All these things, sometimes they happen on an hourly basis, change. So I would say the future is hybrid. Just be aware and intentional when it comes to the conversation, to the client, to the person, to the need. Which one is the right tool that I can pull from my toolbox here? Okay. Any questions? Clear? Maybe put in the chat if it's clear. I can move forward so I know that we are aligned. Cool. Now let's talk about history. Who likes history here? So the past and present and promise. So I put a promise like instead of future just to make it P's. I like P's and C's and D's. But one of the things that I really like is that how one concept could be grounded in history or could be given a different name in a different time, a different era, different, time in history where was called something else, but now we're giving it a different label. So Socrates, one of the greatest philosophers of all time, he is considered by a lot of coaches the founder of coaching, believe it or not. Of course, he didn't call it coaching, but he was more about inquiry and instilling curiosity in his students and other people by not giving clear answers, but more by asking questions. Now, fast forward thousands of years, now in 1990s, where the actual coaching, the word that came kind of, people start to use it when it comes to training and leadership development and up-leveling executive leadership and all that, actually came in the workplace, right? So then it switched to fitness and sports, then came back to the workplace, and now back and forth between which industry is more associated with this term. Doesn't matter, actually. What matters is that coaching went through a lot of changes over time. So let's say in the 1990s, the focus was mainly on performance management and correcting behaviors, and a leader who's strong in communication skills but not achieving results, how we can have a coach for this leader where they can up-level their performance game. And because of a lot of theories, leadership, management, and organizational behavior, in early 2000s, all the way to 2010 or 2000, even after sometimes, like still to today, it depends on where you're located, it became like more about leaders as coaches, where managers can use coaching skills in their management style to be more effective leaders and managers. Now, the new era right now, where we have technology, we have AI, we have social media, we have access to information like never before. The new rule of the game is that how to have a service that was usually excluded to only a few people, that now we can give it to more people. So give it to the other layer in the organization, not only for C-suite, but also VPs and directors and managers, for individual contributors, for high potentials, high performers. We're talking about the whole ecosystem of leadership, how to create a leadership layer in the organization, like an infrastructure, like an operating system, where this organization can up-level its culture and well-being and performance. So the new era right now is not seeing performance and well-being as mutually exclusive, but see them as drivers of each other, where high level of performance can lead to more well-being and high level of well-being can lead to more performance. So the focus of leadership coaching these days is more about the whole thing of leadership, all things leadership, and taking advantage and capitalizing on the evolution of technology, where you have more access to technology. Because technology is an enabler. Technology is not the platform, actually. People are the platform. But with technology, you can access things with a lower price point and higher quality. Now let's talk about mentoring. Same thing. I read about the history of mentoring, and it's surprisingly, mentoring, there was a guy, his name is Mentor, believe it or not. And Homer, when he was a kind of in the kind of the in his journeys, he left his son with Mentor, a friend, to teach him some of the skills. Now, I don't know if this is true or not in history, it's proven or not, or what he did with the son, like teaching him, was actually mentoring. That's why he got the name. But there's some stories and some fun stuff to read about the origin of mentoring. Now, fast forward again, thousands of years, we are talking about before, actually, in the Middle Ages, we're talking about mentoring 1.0, where mentoring was more apprenticeship, like it was very technically defined and very structured and formal, where an apprentice follows the behavior of the teacher or the kind of the worker in order to be like them in 3, 5, 10 years or even more. Now, in the 1970s, where we start to see the word mentoring 2.0, I call it, formal mentoring in organizations, where you have like an executive would be the mentor for a junior or early talent. And now we see more shapes and forms of mentoring. A lot of organizations are taking advantage of the interaction between generations. And because of the new generation right now, the Gen Z, and we have 5 generations in the workplace, the word mentoring has different meanings. So we'll talk about case studies when it comes to mentoring, but reverse mentoring is a new thing. It's not a new thing, but it's still like a new thing for a lot of organizations. Peer mentoring, situational mentoring could be very flexible terminology right now when it comes to mentoring, but not just one definition that a higher level executive mentoring a junior or early talent employee. Any questions so far? I think we have a lot of questions, but I can move forward if nothing kind of urgent. Okay. Now let's talk about behavioral science. So behavioral science, when it comes to mentoring and coaching, I try to kind of first define what behavioral science is before we talk about coaching and mentoring. And the way I see behavioral science or behavioral sciences is that it's a multidisciplinary field that learns from different macro areas of science, like social sciences, like psychology and neuroscience. So the way I see behavioral sciences is basically when it comes to, in general, behavioral science in general, not specifically to leadership development or our conversation today, is studying behaviors and see the forces behind this behavior, whether it's cognitive forces or psychological forces or external forces, sociology, or all these sciences, right? So it's multidisciplinary. So I would say the 3 main domains when it comes to behavioral science in general, we're talking about developmental psychology, neuropsychology, and social psychology. You can add organizational behavior, IO psychology, that's fine. If you're talking about within organizations, within the workplace will add a new field of study, right? Now, why behavioral science matters when it comes to leadership development or when it comes to coaching and mentoring actually matters a lot, because you would understand the behavior of a leader through the lens of behavioral science, the interdisciplinary look, like that's kind of 360, right? And understand why some behaviors are not, aligned with best practices that we hear or read about in articles or books, because science is proving a lot of things that we historically thought is true and they're not true anymore, or vice versa. So when it comes to coaching and mentoring, science will really give you a lot of answers and also a lot of questions. Leadership and learning, workplace coaching, these are the areas where I feel like coaching and mentoring are the good sciences or good forces of understanding why coaches and mentors are very, very important today when it comes to liberating or humanizing or optimizing the workplace, and how we can uplevel the leadership game within organizations from that lens. Now, so before we go to part 2, any questions about coaching versus mentoring, or coaching and mentoring, or the behavioral science behind that? Because we're going to dig deeper into science in a second and understand the impact and the definitions, but I thought maybe you can take a quick kind of question here. So maybe I can see, if you say the future is hybrid, does that mean you employ both at the same time? Wonderful question. I would say yes, it depends on how you define the word employ. We'll talk about the best practices in the how, but the answer, yes. And when we talk about the future is hybrid, we're talking about the future is today, is happening right now. Because of everything has been happening for the last couple of years, the future of 2025 or 2026 or even after, it's happening today in 2022. So highly recommend that. Think about future is how I can be part of this movement right now. So yes, the reality is hybrid. Can you relate to the concept to this the situational leadership model? Absolutely. We'll talk about adaptive leadership in a second, but adaptive leadership and situational leadership both belong to the same family of leadership theories, but they're different. Situational leadership is a very, very old theory comparing to adaptive leadership. Ken Blanchard and other people, other pioneers in the field who worked in this situational leadership model, where you sell, tell, participate, delegate. Adaptive leadership is less about the style of the client or the employee and more about the macro environment and the situations and agility and all these things in the organization. So it's more complex, especially when we live in a world what we call the VUCA world, the volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. Adaptive leadership and agility are the antidote to the VUCA stress that coming and that's happening right now. All right, I'm going to move forward. The why. So measuring the impact, quantitative and qualitative. So this is a theory I'm working on right now, that the connection between leadership coaching in the workplace and adaptive leadership. So when it comes to leaders in general, if you look at kind of the axis here, the independent variable, the variable that you manipulate. So we say, you know what, let's see how leadership coaching, to what extent leadership coaching can impact adaptive leadership. Put whatever left on this side, on the left, and put whatever measurement you're interested in, whether it's a business outcome or psychological outcome, individual outcome, or organizational outcome, doesn't matter. Play with it in your head right now without research. Say, you know what, I would like to understand how leadership coaching can impact meaning at work, or reduce burnout at work, or increase retention, reduce turnover, can increase engagement, reduce absenteeism, if we still use it this way. All these things, all the organizational outcomes, you can put them all to the left. Have a measurement of that and put it at the beginning. Do the intervention. You want to make it more robust, do control group and, you know, intervention group. I treatmentified it like really interesting as a word. And then see how this intervention you're doing actually impact the organization. You don't need a PhD, you don't need a master's, you don't even need a bachelor of science in anything in order to do this exercise. You can do it on a group of 5, you can do it on a group of 500. Just to see if I'm implementing something, doing an intervention within the organization, how this intervention actually helping the organization or the individual or the team change and yield that positive outcome that I'm looking for. With manipulation of the independent variable, that will lead to a lot of interesting insights. And that's what I'm doing right now, is to studying how leadership coaching, especially leadership coaching that focuses on capabilities, not any leadership coaching, can change adaptive leadership with women of color. Because that's kind of what I feel like, if you invest in the capability, not just the capacity, providing the environment, that will lead to more leadership potentials. And leadership potentials, as we know, are the area where we find more discrepancy at the workplace, where we find, when we evaluate, for example, as HR leaders and learning and development professionals, what we call the broken rung, where we basically, not the glass ceiling, not anymore. It's more about the broken rung, when leaders move from the first IC level to the manager, the first kind of jump. This is where we see more discrepancy, where we see more gap. And mainly not because of performance, because performance measures, we can see a lot of women have higher level of performance with significant degrees. But when it comes to potential, we see less of that. We see more women have less potential rating and higher performance rating. And then less promotability, right? And the reason is that one of the areas of disconnecting performance to potential is leadership. Because when you invest in leadership, people will understand leadership even more, and they will see more examples, and that will counter the bias that's happening in the workplace. That's why I'm interested in myself, and hopefully by the end of the year, we'll see something in the printing, right? In the print. Now, how do you measure impact? Very simple. If you're talking about ROI, impact as ROI, we're talking about the benefits minus the cost. Then you put it as a percentage. That's it. benefits minus costs, revenue minus costs, profit, ROI, whatever you want to call it, as simple as this. So when you hear the word ROI, some people might get this, ROI, I don't know how to do it. It's as simple as this. You invest in something, what is the benefit? What is the cost? That's the timer. So I know I know where I'm at here. So just think about it this way. Now, it's simple as a concept, it's very hard to implement. So we know from a concept perspective is actually not too difficult, but from an implementation perspective, we're talking about a lot of complexities in the organization. So the first mindset when it comes to measuring impact of coaching and mentoring is difficult. It is not easy. If it's easy, then the buy-in would be easy, and we don't have to sell any program anymore, because if measuring things is easy, but it's not. It's simple but not easy. And here's one way to think about it from a holistic perspective. I remember back in the day, I used to work with the United Nations in different assignments in different countries. And this is what we used to call the logical framework of impact. So you do activities, you want to measure the number, the quantity of activities you've been doing, and then you want to see the outcomes on when in the workplace or on people. Then you want to see the higher level of value, the impact. You probably heard of Kirkpatrick model. In a way or another, some terminologies would map out to Kirkpatrick. Think about reaction, learning, behavior, and results. Think about activities, could be input, output, outcomes, and creating value. So this is from a book called Systemic Coaching by Peter Hawkins. Really good book if you really want to understand coaching in general. But systemic coaching talks about creating a culture of coaching, creating a strategy of coaching within a program of coaching within your organization. So we really want to understand that this is one of the good books. It's not new, but it's not old. So it's still very relevant. And you just need to add the context of your organization, the big C here. So one of the things, maybe let me talk about outcomes. So one of the ways we measure impact of coaching and mentoring is to think about 360, right? It's one of the classical ways of measuring impact, but that's not the only way. And sometimes it's not the right way. You don't have to do 360 for everything. First, it's costly. Second, people don't like it. A lot of people don't like to provide 360 or receive the 360, and it's going to require pre and post interventions. But one of the ways to think about it is beyond self-assessment or beyond other people's assessment is measuring behaviors. Behaviors are really, really valid way of measuring outcomes and impact. So think about it this way. Let's say before a coaching intervention or mentoring, we see average one-on-ones. Managers have weekly meetings with their direct reports, on average, maybe once every 2 weeks. After the coaching intervention, we ask questions about the behavior, not about assessment or self-assessment or reaction, and see how many one-on-ones or meetings with their direct reports they're having. And you say 1.5 per week, not 1 per week or 1 every other week or 1.5 every other week or something like that. Another behavior you want to see in the organizations, probably more coaching behavior, like people when they do their one-on-ones with their direct reports, they want to see, they check in first, like, how are you doing? How can I help you? How was your day? How can I help? More questions, less telling, more autonomy, less micromanaging, all these things. Now, the best source of that actually is direct reports, not managers, not their managers. They're good source of data, but they're not the best source of data. The best source of data is the one who's receiving the service. It's like customers receiving the service of a company. Direct reports and employees are receiving the service of management and leadership within the organization. Sounds simple and intuitive, but that's true. And very few organizations actually ask employees or act based on the data they collect from employees. And that will lead to a vicious cycle where employees don't trust the surveys anymore. So it becomes like really hard to understand and listen within the organization. So a couple of recommendations here. One, think about outcomes as behaviors and try to measure 3 outcomes every quarter, not more than that. And try to lead with behaviors that or actions that would lead to more trust, so employees can give you more honest, authentic answers. And this is one of the best practices in surveys in general. All right. With that, so maybe a couple of papers here that can give you more sense of what's happening in the world of coaching. There's actually a field of in psychology called coaching psychology. The first person who built that, the first institute of coaching psychology, is Tony Grant. Rest in peace, late Tony Grant, in Australia, where he built like an institution, like a resource center. That was the first one in 2000. And they have master's degrees in coaching. So it's outside the United States, you see more scholarly work in coaching and mentoring. In the United States, you see more practice. Now, this is changing, so we see more degrees these days, but that's kind of historically how this has been the case. Positive psychology and coaching psychology are the psychology of coaching together. And this is one of the most important papers I've seen so far when we talk about coaching in general, not just leadership coaching or workplace coaching. We're talking about coaching in general because this is a meta-analysis. And you can see here, the Ks are the number of research studies and papers. Here you can see number of studies included in the analysis, number of studies when it comes to connecting coaching to performance and skills, 6, to well-being, to coping, attitude, self-regulation. Of course, this is 2014, 8 years ago. A lot of research papers have been published ever since, and so the need for something like this every 5 to 10 years is very, very crucial. You can see 10 studies here. Total participants when it comes to performance skills is 2007 people. Now look at the G factor here. G factor means like the impact. Very important. You can see like really strong numbers, 60%. The connection is huge between coaching and performance. It's huge when it comes to well-being, huge when it comes to attitude, self-regulation. Self-regulation, if I have one tool, if I'm on an island left alone and I have one psychological tool, one thing I can change an organization with, that would be self-regulation. It's the umbrella term that kind of pretty much touches pretty much everything. Emotions, behaviors, control, willpower, grit, growth mindset, habits, all these things are under the umbrella of self-regulation. And hopefully in the future, we can talk about this concept, a fascinating concept of self-regulation, but I can tell you coaching is proven to impact self-regulation. And this is really, really important. Another research study about executive coaching. Now you heard probably about executive coaching. So is it same like leadership coaching, or is it different? You talked about workplace coaching. So I would say workplace coaching is talking about the context and the environment, the place. Leadership coaching is one type of coaching. There are a lot of other types of coaching: wellness coaching, well-being coaching, relationship coaching, career coaching, other types of coaching. Leadership coaching is coaching with leaders to improve leadership. Now, when we talk about executive coaching, we're talking about working with executives. You can work with executives on leadership, and you can work with other things, but mainly what I've seen so far, executive coaching is about leadership coaching for executives. So it's good to kind of find this distinction in your head. Not all coaching is the same. And when you say, let's say this leader wants a coach, the first thing I would do if I'm in your place is double click on the word coaching. What do you mean by coaching? What kind of coaching? Because a lot of people have negative connotation when it comes to coaching and mentoring as well. We say, no, we had a coach and it didn't work out. Okay, let me investigate more. Let me use my curiosity superpower that we showed up with today. Understand what happened with coaching, what kind of coaches, what kind of coaching you were doing, and what kind of coaches you were looking for. I remember a leader I worked with, he asked me, hey, Iyad, I want a coach. I said, okay, when you said the word coach, what do you mean? He said, like, I want Jeff Bezos to be my coach. So, interesting. That's in my head, that wouldn't be a coach, but thank you for showing me. Give me more examples. And I understand he wasn't looking for coaching. He was looking for a mentor, someone who built something like what he's building before and 10 times larger, so he can follow their steps. So asking and coaching leaders when it comes to coaching is actually really important. This is a really good study talking about also coaching is the single most impactful tool within the organization. Now, today I'm not selling you coaching because I think coaching and mentoring are both needed within the organization. We'll talk about it in a second. But what I think, if you have one tool to use and you have like $1 to spend, well, I would spend it on coaching. Not because I work at a coaching company or I study coaching, but really coaching is taking a holistic approach when it comes to development and leadership development. And it's proven by research. And really kind of, I'm trying to find where some research, I'm still trying to find where mentoring would be more effective if it's used only like as a tool, as an only tool. But the best solution is you to have both coaching and mentoring because you need both. And we'll talk about it in a second. So coaching, I'm saying to talk about it in a second a lot. So coaches, HR managers, is evaluation and perception about coaching as the executive coaching. EC is an executive coaching, comparing to other learning and development and training and even mentoring. If you can see the last one here, is the most effective tool from a perception perspective of the coachees and the HR managers. We're talking about good sample here, 256 HR professionals. This is a recent study. This is actually in 2000, if I'm not mistaken, this is the 2017. Really good study here. Now we talked about coaching. Let's talk about the impact of mentoring. Well, mentoring is proven to, if it's done right, to prove impact when it comes to performance. Again, this is like a meta-analysis here, happening a number of studies. The N is total number of participants, and you can see the impact here, the correlation. The minuses here is a negative correlation, and you want to see a negative correlation when it comes to unwanted behavior, like withdrawal behavior, withdrawal intention, and all these things, deviance, right? So coaching is very impactful. Mentoring is very impactful. We know that. I'm assuming a lot of people showed up today because they know that intuitively, or they've seen it, or they were on the receiving end or the giving end. But to say that without numbers and facts, and to try to sell a mentoring and coaching program within the organization and tell the story about it before, during, and after becomes harder and harder because we're all competing on resources. So I would highly recommend pulling some of research papers, and I can show the research papers names later if you want, but this is like one of the ways to think about, yes, the world is actually proving coaching and mentoring as effective tools within the organization, interventions, and they're not just like, you know, a good feeling, I'm glad I have a coach, more like a perk than actually behavioral changing and influence tool. So the how, and I feel like I still have, okay, I have like 5 more minutes to talk about the how. So I will start by quickly about 2 case studies, and both are online, so I'm not gonna talk a lot about them, but one about coaching and one about mentoring. So the one about coaching, let me start with coaching first, is with user testing. This is a company that Sounding Board worked with, and together they proved that coaching has actually moved the needle internally. Using surveys from the coaching engagement with different leaders within the organization. And the paper is published on the Sounding Board website. And really kind of fascinating case study, how coaching, using self-assessment, using the evaluation of the coach and the coachee and the HR leaders and the sponsors of the program, actually you can map this out to organizational outcomes like performance, like communications, like conflict resolutions, and all these things with double digits change. You know, not talking about trivial change, 50%, 30%, 25%. So I highly recommend that you go and check out this paper and other case studies. It's not a paper, it's a case study. And you can see how that happened and why, and what was the business case, and how that proved the credibility of the intervention with the leaders. Now, the mentoring case here, this is Google. Google created a program called G2G, Googler to Googler. It's an old program, it's not new, but I learned a lot from this program, and I wanted to build learning and development interventions and mentoring specifically. But basically, Google has, if I'm not mistaken, 80% of their learning actually happens as peers. So peers teach each other, like groups. So let's say I'm an experienced learning experience designer, and someone who's interested in this field at Google, right? They will know that I have the skill, and they know that I'm willing to share. And through the facilitation of learning and development as Google, this is how they scaled learning and development. They created this learning culture and learning marketplace where people can teach each other. It's really fascinating. You can find it on rework.google.com. And you can find it on online. Just search G2G, Google to Google, or mentorship, or learning and development. Really cool study. But again, back to the idea of coaching and mentoring, they're not necessarily exclusive. You can do both, and we'll talk in a second about how that works. So here's the thing. When it comes to the why, who, and how, and with. So when we think about mentoring, mentoring is, yes, it's about development in general and growth. Yes, about the center of the conversation is the client. Yes, about adding value. But if we talk about mentoring, I would say think about it is that most people think about mentoring is that for career development, career growth, acquiring more knowledge so you can become better and more skilled and higher level of mastery, but within the field you are in, because you already determined what you want to do. So you already signed up for mentorship or with a mentor in order to have this upward mobility. Or internal mobility doesn't have to be upward, like specifically, or transactionally. It could be upward, like a larger sense, but by going to other kind of areas of work. Like you can have a mentor in product management with a peer in order to be a product manager, but that doesn't mean you're coming from a lower place. Apprenticeship programs like this, and internal mobility and rotations and all that. It's mainly for early career employees, but I've seen mid-career and even senior professionals tap into mentorship opportunities, and we've seen them a lot when it comes to diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives, where mentorship programs and sponsorship programs to empower leaders and connect them to other leaders so they can see this journey, get inspired, and learn from it. Mainly informal, actually. Most mentorship happen informal, but there are a lot of formal mentorship program. The goal is when you, for example, build an ERG, employee resource group, that would on its own create this sense of mentorship. Doesn't have to be labeled mentorship, but that would create sense of mentorship, because people coming from different places, sharing an identity or more, and they're trying to help each other career-wise, create a sense of community and connectedness and relatedness. That would be type of mentorship loosely defined. Mainly internal, and it's an iterative. This is like one of the best practices I've learned in my life. Don't build the best mentorship program. Don't build the best coaching program. Build the most iterative prototype, because you're gonna break it down and you're gonna scale, and whatever you build today is not gonna work for next quarter. So try to build the minimum viable product, the MVP here, and see how that goes, and then scale whatever you can scale. What is the scalability here? What is the robust factors? What are we gonna keep core? What are we gonna add more? And all these things, and partner up with business leaders. Business leaders can own 80% of the mentorship program. The role of HR leaders and the role of learning and development leaders, talent leaders, OD leaders is not building anymore, and it's more facilitation of building. And this is how you scale. Now, easier said than done, and I know mentality and buy-ins and all that, but if you come up with this mindset that it's a shared ownership and responsibility, start small, the buy-in process becomes easier and easier, but it's going to still be there. Like moving people from interested to committed is going to require how to embed mentorship and coaching in the flow of work, in the context of their work, instead of seeing them as events, or moving people away from the go mode to the grow mode, right? So it's going to be a matter of coaching and mentoring leaders on mentoring and coaching. When it comes to coaching, we talked about it, leadership development and effectiveness, pretty much is for everyone these days. That's the whole premise of coaching 3.0 and after. mainly formal. Now, I recommend think about coaching that you need internal coaches for sure, as capabilities, as skills, but you really want to create a coaching culture, you would need to rely on partners. And this is like where I really think about the future. Is happening already. Influx of coaching offering happening this year and last year and the year before, where the demand is just really high. Everybody wants somebody to talk to safely and clearly, and get feedback and ask questions and rebuild this sense of efficacy and strength and resilience and all these things. So you feel like you're in control of your life in a world of uncertainty. So the antidote to uncertainty, again, is that sense of connection. And partner up with operations and analytics. You don't have to do all the analytics yourself. If you have an analyst on your team or from other teams, I would highly recommend tapping into these potentials. So last question here, back to Menti. If you can, let me give me 1 second and we can check out here. Ask you a couple questions. We promise that we're going to ask you questions and get your feedback. Here you go. So do you see my screen?
Not yet.
Okay, here you go. Present. You go, share screen. I think I have like 1 minute. So let's see here. All right, so go to Menti, and this is the code. You can see the code here. 73780815. And I just wanted to ask you again, how are you feeling? Any changes in feelings that happened since you started? Just bring more consciousness and awareness to what is happening with you right now. I feel like I'm talking like yoga. I don't know how to do that, honestly. But I really care about
Give it a try.
Bring consciousness. Set intentions. I love it. Awesome. Wow, overwhelmed. Oh, okay. Coached. I love it. Curious. Can I get the deck? For sure. Encourage. I love it. Thank you so much. Keep them coming. And that's the second one. One takeaway from today's conversation. Just one takeaway. Could be one word. That's it. Let's see here. Always you wait for like 10 seconds and they, that's it. Your basis. I hope not. Future is now. Case studies, clarity, opportunities, inspiration, listen. Nice, nice, nice. Awesome. Beautiful. And last one, that's the most important one. That's what I care about a lot here is, what's one action you're committed to taking immediately? And again, this is a conversation. This is just to spark some curiosity. There are tons of research and resources outside that. Just using the keywords from today, you would tap into a whole wealth of knowledge and resources when it comes to coaching and mentoring. Watch demos, watch leaders talking about their experiences. Nice. Let's see the steps here. Find a coach. Redefine my coaching mentor. Find a mentor, find a coach. Nice. Good to have you coaching and mentoring. Research, more coaching. I love it. Wow. Keep them coming. Thank you so much. I'm gonna stop sharing. I think Rhonda, back to you. So thank you so much.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you so much, Ed. It was just an excellent presentation. There are so many comments and questions and everything coming in the chat. Like, I do a lot of these, but this is very plentiful. I couldn't even stay on top of them all. We will make sure that we get the chat over to you and the folks at Sounding Board. And the questions for everyone that had the great questions, Iyad and Sounding Board will make sure that they follow up. We'll send those questions to them. I thank you all for attending. The recording will be archived on hr.com today, and we will send an email once it's ready to view. Your HRCI credit will appear in your hr.com account within 2 business days. And also note, and I'm sure the results should be great, I put a link to an exit survey in the chat. So as usual, when I close out the session, it'll open in a new browser on your computer. So just take a moment. Your feedback is so important to us and to the folks at Sounding Board. Again, thank you so much, Iyad. Just an excellent presentation, and we really look forward to a next one. Take care, everyone.
Thank you.